Well, welcome to Converge. I'm very excited to have Tori Samples with us from Stellar Development Foundation. Tori is a senior product manager there, and I'll let her give a little bit of background on what she does at Stellar. We haven't spoken to Stellar on this podcast, but I've been very eager to do so. So, Tori, thank you for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and of course, a little bit more about Stellar more broadly for those who are unfamiliar with the organization, the foundation, and then a little bit about specifically what you do within the foundation.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Alex. So as mentioned, my name is Tori Samples. I am a senior product manager at SDF, Stellar Development Foundation, and my work focuses on bulk payments and humanitarian aid, humanitarian assistance. It's kind of a fun pairing, but basically meeting the needs of organizations around the world who need to send money to individuals. That's been my focus for the last couple of years at Stellar. Previously, I built a digital wallet actually on Stellar, on the Stellar blockchain for refugees and migrants in East Africa. So coming from fintech, coming from the blockchain world, have been building on Stellar for about the last 6 years and really love the opportunity to build products that bring best-in-class technology to the people who usually receive it last. My background before that was technical, and so when I built this digital wallet, we were actually the first to offer blockchain-based services on non-smartphones, little basic phones that you remember having back in the day, still very common across Africa. And so we were able to do that, scaled it across the continent, and then were eventually acquired by a US money transfer company, at which point I joined SDF. So that's kind of my background and my personal interest in things, combining the tech and the impact side of things. Stellar itself the Stellar network is a layer 1 blockchain. It's been around since 2014. We're about to hit our 10-year anniversary. Very exciting. So we're one of the older chains. And it was originally built to facilitate very fast, cheap cross-border payments. We've expanded a lot since then, but that was the original thesis. So we've got the layer 1 technology itself, and then we have the foundation behind it. The foundation has a really interesting structure. We're a nonprofit whose mission is to create equitable access to the global financial system. So we do that in a variety of ways, including building products that become open sourced and available to the community. We also work with regulators and policymakers and help companies and individuals building on the Stellar network to do that effectively around the world.
Wonderful. That's great. Well, it's great timing to have you for this episode. Last week or a couple of weeks ago, we spoke with a gentleman who is leading sort of a startup that is really trying to build out new payment infrastructures on the African continent for workers both abroad and within Africa. So this is very, very relevant to a subject that we really dug into quite deeply on our last episode. And I guess to start things off with you, I really enjoyed an article you penned in CoinDesk recently, and I'm going to pull the quote from it. You said, when you started building blockchain products, you frequently said blockchain is a database. It doesn't save the world. Technology on its own rarely does. Every technology's value hinges on the functionality and utility it brings to everyday people in their environments. Couldn't have said it better. And I think a lot of people are waiting to see that type of utility in the blockchain space really take foot. So on that note, to set the stage, let's zoom out and talk about the challenges that will really deliver that utility that you're trying to solve for at Stellar in providing global humanitarian aid. What are the challenges that exist today in providing aid globally, and specifically those challenges faced by people and organizations sending money across borders? And then we can hone in on how technology at Stellar is sort of uniquely empowered to bring real-world utility to that area.
Sure. And I should say that article in CoinDesk was all predicated on this metaphor of the elevator and how blockchain is paralleling the deployment of any new technology, even something as commonplace as the elevator. And so while I talk about these subjects in the context of very niche environments like humanitarian aid, I actually believe that these lessons apply pretty much everywhere. And so I would say that the challenges that we see in the humanitarian aid space are not necessarily unique to that sector industry. It's something that the entire blockchain world is conquering in its own way. So hopefully we'll all get there together. But on the humanitarian aid side, it's a context where most people don't really understand what's happening today. And so I always like to set the stage a little bit. So as background, humanitarian aid obviously has been around for a long time. Unfortunately, we are still seeing more and more and more crises each year that necessitate intervention. And so that could be in the form of an organization coming in and providing food and blankets. That's kind of the traditional model, and that's what most people think of. But over the last 20 years, there's actually been a larger pivot towards providing cash or cash equivalents to people in need. And that basically provides them with the agency to meet their own needs. It's been proven effective and efficient over time, and many organizations have started using that as their primary intervention. So that's been around before blockchain. And again, it's been proven very effective over time. There have been digital methods of dispersing cash within that realm. So it's not to say that blockchain is the first way to digitally disperse funds, but blockchain solves a lot of the issues that organizations face when they're doing this amazing work. The legacy financial system is, as you know, very, it's opaque, it's expensive, it's slow. And so even when there are digital methods of dispersing cash domestically, they're often very challenging to access when you're trying to send money across borders, and they're not very efficient. And so what blockchain has been able to provide is a set of instant, cheap, transparent rails for organizations that need to provide money without setting up a full on-the-ground infrastructure. The last thing you want to do is send in 200 staff members, if you don't have to facilitate these kinds of interventions. And so with Stellar Aid Assist, which is the program built around humanitarian aid on Stellar, there's a product underneath that basically allows for organizations to send money to individuals on their phones in a stable and portable way so that those people can receive the money and do whatever they need to do with it. We trust people to meet their own needs in their environments, especially in a time of crisis. And by receiving it on their phone, they can take their money with them wherever they need to go. They can keep it safely until they need to access it instead of carrying physical cash, which is a risk, of course, in many ways. And that money, if it's coming, especially in digital dollars, is often more stable than what they're able to access day to day. So it preserves the value of those funds, both for the individual, and it stretches them farther for the organization.
Yeah, really interesting. So why, I guess, can you go a little deeper on why this is an important area of focus for Stellar, and why is it a key focus, and what features about Stellar blockchain in particular make this possible and make this a really strong use case for the Stellar network?
Yeah, so it kind of actually goes back to why I originally started building on Stellar 6 years ago at this point. The technology itself is built so well for this particular flow of funds. Stellar has its own consensus mechanism, and that allows for very fast and cheap payments. So again, since 2014, Stellar has been able to process payments in 5 seconds for a fraction of a penny in fees. And of course, it's transparent by nature. So we realized after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, how impactful this could be for organizations that were trying to send funds into conflict zones. And from that, we built out this product called the Stellar Disbursement Platform that facilitates that flow of funds specifically. But it all goes back to Stellar's inherent design with those fast, cheap payments that are transparent. And then the other critical piece of that is that we have a full ecosystem to support that flow of funds. So you've got the layer 1 blockchain itself, and then the ecosystem that's built on top of it. And that includes assets. Stellar has always facilitated easy asset issuance. So we have over 70% of the world's GDP represented on the Stellar blockchain. And that includes assets like Circle's USDC that can be transferred around the world and is very secure. We have an ecosystem of wallets that are customized for specific regions around the world, but still allow for that portability of funds. You can take your money with you wherever you go. It works all around the world. And then we have a very robust ecosystem of on and off ramps. We have a partnership with MoneyGram globally that facilitates cash to crypto on and off ramping, but that is by no means the only one. And so we have ways of getting money in and out from digital methods like bank accounts and mobile money around the world, in addition to retail locations that make it very accessible for literally anyone in the world to access the benefits of blockchain and crypto.
Yeah, it's a really impressive, broad-reaching network there, and I can see how that really sets itself apart for this use case. Can you mentioned digital wallets and how they reduce cost and create efficiencies and simplify the user experience for those who perhaps have struggled with traditional bank accounts or just lack access to those financial instruments and services? Can you talk a little bit more about digital wallets and Stellar's focus on them and sort of the role you see them playing in the coming years?
Absolutely. And this is where it's really great to be able to point to that ecosystem, not just of products, but of builders. So we have people all around the world that have built digital wallets for their own environments. That's something that we like to facilitate because we believe that people are best equipped to solve the problems that they live in day to day. So we have a variety of wallets available on Stellar that facilitate all sorts of different types of financial services for people. Generally, across all of them, I would say that the threshold for opening a digital wallet is the requirements maybe are easier than getting a bank account. So for many people around the world, they're not able to access a bank account, but they can open a digital wallet on their phone. And that's an easier way for them to enter the formal financial system. These are people like my former customers in East Africa that might be discriminated against overtly or just face subtle bias in their interactions with the formal financial system. They might legally be able to get an account, but that can be very challenging day to day. Or even if they're able to get a bank account, the interest rates might be 16 to 30% on a loan. And so this opens up a brand new world for them. In addition to providing just access, it also generally includes very valuable features like sending peer-to-peer for free and having lower KYC requirements than some other types of services. And with that, they're also getting access to, again, a global set of rails because Stellar itself, the Stellar network, is global. They're able to send and receive with literally anyone in the world. And so it's reducing the impact of borders and distance. And as we know, we've seen post-pandemic, money still needs to cross borders even when people can't. So we're only seeing that trend increase over time.
Great. So one other thing I recently heard, you gave a recent talk at Consensus, which is a blockchain conference. I heard you mention Argentina, I think it was, as an example of a use case for blockchain in protecting people's money against currency devaluation. And I think as the crypto world expands to the mainstream a little bit and understanding grows more in this area, we'll hear more around the asset class being framed as sound money in a way, or a hedge against currency debasement, not just overseas, but even in the U.S., perhaps due to its scarcity and its tangibility. I think with Bitcoin, even now having another summer season, we've heard some major investment managers in the space, like Larry Fink, call it sound money and a good store of value. So can you talk a bit more about how you at Stellar frame this benefit when you work to offer services in markets and geographies where currency debasement has been and is a real present threat? And how do you see this benefit or use case being pitched globally in the future? Do you think it'll become much more a core part of what you're trying to offer as a benefit for working with Stellar?
Absolutely. Stability, of course, is a huge value add for people around the world. It's hard to underestimate how much that can make a difference in the day-to-day lives of people. And again, because of Stellar's native design, that's something that has been part of Stellar's infrastructure since 2014. Asset creation, asset issuance on Stellar is very easy. And of course, there has to be a set of guardrails around that to make sure that the asset itself is secure and stable and trustable and all of that. But Stellar is built very well for facilitating that. And so we've actually been able to see the impact of that over the last 10 years. Being able to, of course, save, transact, and send stable assets helps preserve value for individuals. And the effects of that just multiply the further and further out you get in that chain. In my world, in aid, that means that the impact of aid organizations' work stretches further day to day because they truly care about every penny that comes in. Those are donor funds, and they have to treat them with with very high standards, obviously, but the more they're able to preserve that, the better, the more impact it can make for people day to day. But it's not just tied to dollarization. And so that's one that we tend to speak in terms of US dollars because it's easy, but Stellar itself can support many other types of assets, and I think that we'll see growth in that area. Circle started issuing a digital euro last year on Stellar and other chains, and I'm very excited about that. But we also have, tokenized yen or real world assets that can make an impact in that space as well. I from my work in Africa, have seen, dollars are not always the right approach. That is not always usable. That's not always what people want. It's not always the appropriate asset. And so we have to make sure that we're building solutions that, again, are able to meet the need appropriately and still very efficiently.
Yeah. So tell us a bit more about the Stellar disbursement platform a bit more broadly. Its use cases such as, I think, payroll is one you mentioned, and that's an interesting one because I know payroll, there's a lot of opportunity to make a big impact with blockchain technology in that space. I think, it's a key area where these types of payments can make a huge impact, not just for individuals, but businesses as well. So how is Stellar leading that charge in terms of payroll and just disbursement more broadly? And can you share some examples maybe of success stories recently that would bring to light what you're doing?
Definitely. I love this because it's my day to day. So the Stellar
Awesome.
Disbursement platform I've referenced a little bit, but it is an open source tool that anyone can implement in their organization to facilitate bulk payments. So money moving from an organization out to many individuals at once. We started with humanitarian aid, of course, but underneath that, again, it's just a bulk payments flow. And so when you start to think about how applicable that is across the world, you realize that there are so many different use cases where that can be valuable. The earned income use case is a favorite of mine, admittedly, so payroll, but not just for employees. That could be for contractors or creators, freelancers, gig workers. There's so many different types of earned income in this day and age. And especially now that remote work is everywhere, ubiquitous across the world, literally, we're seeing more and more need for money to be able to flow across borders seamlessly. And people they want their funds when they earn them, when they deserve them. There's no reason that somebody should have to wait 90 days to be paid today for work that they did on the internet. That's ridiculous. And so with blockchain, we can solve that. We could, any organization through the Stellar Disbursement platform could pay their employees or contractors or whoever as frequently as they wanted with literally no increase in administrative cost. That's usually what it comes back to, right? Is organizations need to be able to pay people efficiently, and so they tend to batch them, pay them once a month. And if it's across borders, people often have to set up a USD bank account in their own country, and that can be difficult. And so this solves a lot of those just administrative hassles that organizations have faced. But it's not just for companies, right? So we've already covered humanitarian organizations, and then we've got private companies that need to pay people, and then that leaves one big one, which is governments and donors. There are a lot of different programs now around the world for different social programs, universal basic income, even things like tax refunds and pandemic stimulus checks. Again, anytime you've got money moving from an organization out to individuals, this can be a fit. So the realm of possibilities is very wide, but we're excited to see what comes of that. And then in terms of success stories, of course, the one that we always highlight is humanitarian assistance to people in Ukraine who have been displaced from their homes and are receiving money on Stellar into digital wallets. That's the very easy one, and we've spoken about it at length. and that program is still doing very well, ongoing. It's all through UNHCR, which is one of the UN agencies for refugees. And I think it's very important to note too that this is not Stellar doing this work. This is not SDF. This is organizations that were already acting in these spaces, just implementing a blockchain component and putting their flow of funds on the blockchain to facilitate these kinds of payments. But outside of the UN and outside of Ukraine, we're also starting to see traction for small companies that need to pay their remote workforce, especially in Latin America, where phone penetration is very high, but people often do prefer to be paid in dollar equivalents or digital dollars. And we're continuing to see more and more in the cash assistance and humanitarian space as well.
Great. That's wonderful. And obviously the benefits to people like us are so very clear, but it's still facing some headwinds in terms of adoption, that being blockchain and crypto enabled payments. But you said really, really succinctly in that CoinDesk article I mentioned, you said that if a blockchain product makes a person's life tangibly easier or better, they will likely use it. And I think that's so true. And in past episodes on this podcast, we've talked about how when blockchain goes mainstream, quote unquote, no one will know they're using it, but they'll know the benefits because it will make their lives easier in some crucial way. No one cares, about what the consensus mechanism is in the background, all that stuff. But in light of that, can you share, like, what are the challenges that Stellar is really going up against when it comes to expanding these amazing use cases and services that you offer? What's the pushback you still have? And I know obviously regulations is sort of the elephant in the room for everyone, but why are we not quite there yet, including regulations and other things that you're seeing, if the benefits are really so evident and have even been demonstrated on a global scale, as you've mentioned?
Well, that quote came out of my experience as a former founder and me wanting to sometimes just yell at my potential customers, this could make your life better. I see it. Why don't you? So that's
Yeah.
real world experience speaking right there. And coming out of my own frustration, because
Yeah,
at the end of the day,
bet.
it's not about me yelling into the void how much better this can make someone's life. It is about making it so clear to them how this benefits them that it's a clear choice. I always say you have to trust your users because they know their own lives better than you do. And even when you think you know what's best for them, if they're not choosing to use your product, then there's probably a really good reason for that. Either you haven't built the right thing or you're not communicating it effectively. Within blockchain, I tend to think that it's more of the latter at this point. We've had some time to build all of the wrong things. We're still building some wrong things, of course, but I think that we've seen a trend towards building towards real world utility, and there are many products out there today that do that very well. And so then it's just about communicating that value to the user base. And so we have to be very careful about the way that we position it, of course, and we still oftentimes get sucked into talking about the behind the scenes mechanisms and functions and all of this that nobody cares about. Our CEO, Janelle Dixon, often talks about when the internet was first on the rise and how blockchain parallels that deployment of a new technology, and how when the internet really took off, that's when we stopped talking about how it works behind the scenes and just started showing people all of the cool and fun things that they can do on the internet. So I think I think it's very apt. We will get there. I tend to think that, just a personal opinion, enterprises are the key. So those organizations, because they often hold the money and the power in financial relationships, more than just individuals or individual consumers. But enterprises have higher standards and they don't want to be seen as risky generally. And so we have to make sure that the products that we're building, A, meet their needs, and so that they can move their financial flows onto a blockchain-based system. And then B, we have to make sure that those products are meeting standard financial reporting requirements and tax and accounting, and integrating with the legacy financial system enough to bridge those gaps to get them over those hurdles. We at SDF, and I believe many other blockchain organizations, we're not trying to create a parallel financial system. We are trying to build upon what is already there and provide additional value. So I think that's definitely one key to unlocking it. And then I would just say to keep the long-term in mind. We are still, in the tech world, we still move faster than most industries. And so it creates a skewed set of expectations in terms of what's realistic timing-wise. When you're working with, especially when you're working with companies and organizations, we have to be patient. We have to meet people where they are. And I think that if we do that, and if we remain patient, then we'll get there.
Yeah, well said. And I do see a lot of progress, which is great. So it's exciting that we do, given how much of an impact this technology can have, I think it's only natural that there's going to be roadblocks along the way. I just want to go a bit further on that. Is it just making the technology available and beneficial that will lead to mass adoption, or is sort of the right product one that adheres? Is the right product one that adheres to global regulations as closely as possible to avoid roadblocks like we've seen throughout this industry at certain times? What else constitutes the right product in blockchain, in your view, that will take this industry into its next, flourishing era, as far as, seeing adoption of digital assets, crypto, and overall the more sort of the Web3 distributed internet coming to fruition? What is the right product in the view of Stellar? You've spoken to this a little bit, but is there anything else in terms of the forces that would lead to that mass adoption within sort of the sweet spot of a product?
Well, it's an interesting question. I want to say you're cheating a little bit. You know that there is no right product for the world, and at this point, no global regulatory environment, unfortunately. I hope that we get there someday. But
Yep.
yeah, I think that making the technology available and beneficial is table stakes. Again, for any new product, take blockchain out of it. Anything, you have to be available and beneficial, of course. But I do think that we can't get out of a conversation without talking about regulation a little bit. So yes, the regulatory environment does need to come along. And that's one thing that our organization is very deeply involved in. Many others are as well. At the end of the day, I think, again, it's about just explaining the benefits and the security and showing the evidence and remaining patient and meeting people where they are. We're having the right sets of conversation, but it just takes time, and that's okay. We'll get there, and we've seen progress on that. But on the product side, well, and I should say, before we move off of regulation, of course, these products have to adhere to local regulation. I personally don't think that we'll ever get to a point of having truly global regulation, but of course it needs to adhere to local regulation. And people who are building products outside of that scope, I would not personally feel comfortable using, and I would never advocate for anyone to use those products, especially those that might be marginalized in some way or outside of the formal financial system. That's not going to help them in the long run. So I'm very much of the belief that we need to stay inside that system and work within it to expand what's supported locally. But on the product side, if you look at financial inclusion and that standard life cycle, generally what you see is that products and people start with formal payments. That leads to savings products, that leads to lending products, and then that leads to more sophisticated products like insurance and investment over time. So I'm a believer that we should probably still follow that life cycle within the blockchain space. If we're trying to bring people into that, that follows just a natural progression of what people are comfortable with. And then also just, again, let people solve their own problems. They are the experts on their own needs. So we as SDF make our technology available, and we support an ecosystem of builders, firmly believing that they are the experts on how to solve their own problems. We're here to support them. And as a former founder, I can say that ecosystem of support makes a huge difference day to day. We need funding, we need mentoring, we need partnerships, and we need people to come alongside this effort in order to get to truly global adoption. And then in addition to all that, we just need time. So I'm still very positive on the whole thing. And I know that the people working in this space are truly passionate and talented and skilled, which gives me so much confidence in where we're going as an industry and that we will get there.
Wonderful to hear. And I echo that confidence. I see amazing companies that work on this, and the building community is just incredibly energized by the possibilities ahead. So I'm very excited to see all of this. And thank you for sharing the stellar view and journey, and your amazing work that you've already done in the space, even so early in the evolution of it. Really great to hear your perspectives, and great to have you here today, Tori. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Alex. Really appreciate it.